Trevelyan believed that Ireland's estates must be made more profitable, which meant getting rid of inefficient or debt-ridden landlords, like Major Dennis Mann, the owner of Strokestown Park. When Mann inherited the estate, it was £30,000, say between £2 and £3 million at today's prices, in debt. From my own reading of the family's papers, it's obvious that Mann was in an impossible situation. None of his thousands of tenants had paid any rent for years. They were under threat not to do so from Molly Maguires, the 1840s equivalent of paramilitary gangs. But the government's new act now made landlords responsible for the rates of all their poorer tenants. Mann himself was assassinated before the new act became law, but the problem remained for his successors. How could landlords pay the rates for thousands of poor tenants who were no longer paying them any rent? The answer was to evict them and destroy their houses. This was a brutal, almost a murderous business, but it wasn't entirely the landlord's fault. The effect of the government's new act was to force many landlords to evict all their poorer tenants or else go bankrupt. Other people on the estate were forbidden to shelter evicted tenants, because if the homeless people remained on his land, the landlord would still be liable for their rates.
The ditch side, the dripping rain, and the cold sleet are the covering of the wretched outcast the moment the cabin is tumbled over him.
No country ravaged by a hostile army could have been reduced to a more deplorable condition.
Whole districts are cleared. The torpor and apathy which have seized on the people are only surpassed by the atrocities committed by those who set the dictates of humanity and the decree of the Almighty at equal defiance.
At least 1 million people died before the famine ran its course, the great majority of them Roman Catholics. They died in conditions of abject misery and degradation. For many of them, the only consolation was the Christian promise of life everlasting. It must have been that faith which enabled them in the end to face death with such extraordinary submissiveness.
They passed through 3 stages. At first they faced starvation manfully, too proud to accept grudged help. Then they were mad with despair. Then they were full of hopeless resignation. The hunger is on us. 'Tis the will of God. The will of God be done.